The battle is far from over, Dark.
Hello fellow gamers, and welcome to my review and head-to-head of Shadows of Mordor across the PC, PS4 and Xbox One. This game came out sometime this week. I had my copy on Tuesday, I think, or Monday, I can't remember now. But whenever it was, I was playing it, I was enjoying it. I am nearly finished on the game, but I've had enough time to play across now 3 platforms to get my head-to-heads together, my review, my technical analysis of this game, and also give you guys the feedback and the information you want. If you want to buy this game, if you're into this kind of genre of game, the RPG element, the adventure, fantasy element, and certainly Lord of the Rings, then is this game going to deliver? Before I jump straight in and give you my final analysis, let's begin where you start. We begin the game playing as Talion, the ranger, and his day starts off pretty bad, as you start the game dead. It all goes a bit Pete Tong as soon as the game begins, because you're already dead and you're remembering back to where your life began, while you're sitting in this mist-filled dead plain, not knowing what to do, where to go, or even who you are. The first thing that strikes you about this game is the beginning is very strong, and it certainly sets you up for the rest of the game and puts you in a mood set, if you're into this kind of stuff, to certainly make you feel as if you want to seek revenge on those that wronged you. And they bloody did wrong you. I'm not going to go into detail of spoiling the beginning part of it, but you can see it when you buy the game, or if you watch my first hour of the game, which I posted on the day I got this game. But you're not trapped in Arda alone. To join you on this journey is the Wraith, or his stage name Celebrimbor, who also shares the same fate as your own. Cursed to dwell between the realm of the living and the dead, you now need to break this curse, and therefore seek revenge on the one that put you here, the Dark Hand of Sauron. And so commences your tale of revenge and adventure. Set in the epic universe of J.R. Tolkien, it is set before The Lord of the Rings but after The Hobbit, and prior to Mordor becoming a complete barren wasteland from the Dark Lord. Along your way you have to work through Sauron's army slowly but surely, working your way up through the ranks, learning about each individual and each structure of the area, and taking them down one by one. The game plays out with mission structures based on singular storyline advance missions, and also quite a few dotted around separate additional missions that add additional bonuses, perks, but these may range from freeing prisoners in different areas to bow or weapon challenges, riding on the back of a Caragor slaying orcs with your bow and arrow or sword, or even hunting down markings on the wall for Ithildin challenges for Celebrimbor. Outside of this, your main missions are the ones that carry the story along, and they flow quite well. The downside of the maps are the fact that they are quite large and very barren. This can make a lot of the areas look very samey, and it's alleviated by the second area that's more lush and green, but all accurate to the world in which it is set. But it can be a little bit mundane when you've died and you haven't opened up one of the towers and you have to travel all the way back to where the main story is, and you only really have 2 means of transport: legging it, or jumping on the back of one of the panther animals in the game and riding those, which is a skill you have to learn pretty early on in the game, but you have to learn it to be able to do that anyway. And then you've also got to find them. As you work through the map, you open up these citadels as you use your Wraith powers to find out where they are, to basically start them off as a save point and resume point, and also open up fast travel across the map. These citadels come in handy when the missions get quite widespread, because you can end up spending most of your time travelling back to where you need to be because you failed to finish the mission and got slayed or overpowered by the amount of orcs in the area. And this brings me to one of my first gripes with the game. The Nemesis system within the game is an amazing piece of work, and it really makes a difference to how the game plays, to the individual, and how your playstyle works through. The downside is these captains and chiefs and war chiefs that come around in the area can be attracted to the fight you've just started off by accident by taking somebody out. I've actually had instances where I've had at least 3 different war chiefs all trying to fight me at the same time because they've all wandered into the battle that I'm in. You then completely get overpowered because these guys have got crossbows and poison darts, and they end up knocking you down and killing you because there's just too many of them in the area and you can't fight back because there's rangers around shooting you from distance and you're rolling around trying to get away. This can get a little frustrating because if you haven't opened up the area like I've just said, you've got to travel all the way back to that area. And because these people have wandered into this battle, the Nemesis system, which works on the style of whoever you kill and whoever you meet, they remember you and you remember them. If they are in the middle of a battle and they kill you, they might rank up and become more powerful, take over other areas and move up to war chiefs. They have internal power struggles amongst themselves, irrespective of whether you get involved or not. Sometimes you'll see them on missions where they'll be challenging themselves, or some rites of passage where they'll be fighting Caragors let out of a cage, and you can then use that time, because they're vulnerable, to kill them easier. If you fail to do that, or they're recruiting new followers, they'll become more powerful and move up the ranks. The downside of that is, if you're in one of these battles where 3 or 4 have wandered in and you happen to be killed by one of them, they all rank up. So even though one of them never even traded a blow with you, they've suddenly become a war chief just because they walked into the realms where you were and watched you get your face kicked in. And the process works, and they remember who you are, your last battle, things about your fight and the time it took, and they mock you. And it makes the whole experience far more personable. And therefore you feel more compelled to go after and hunt these bastards down and cut their sodding heads off. The downside is, whether they're level 8 or level 80, they always seem to be about the same level. They're just invulnerable to certain types of attack, so some of their weaknesses and defences that you find out, which you can use by capturing other people in the game and then interrogating them, reading their mind, using your wraith powers, and then using that to work out the secrets and the intel that you need from that individual. So they may be afraid of Caragors, for example, or their fear of burning, or their fear of losing. Some of the ones are quite funny, but it is a great system that worked well. The downside, like I say, is the fact that it doesn't seem to affect the actual outcome of the character and the strength of that character throughout the game, or at least to the point I've played to at this point. Working through the map and taking down these chiefs and even moving people into other positions that suit your ends is a really interesting and fresh view on how these games can play out, and it makes your interaction with the characters that much more believable. Also, on the online side, you get a notification in these vendetta missions where you or somebody else can avenge yours or their death. If you do this, or they do this successfully, you get a notification in the game, which is a nice unique touch, and I really like the Nemesis system. It's something that feels it's the beginning of a really fresh idea that I'm absolutely sure many games will copy this gen, which is ironic really on this game, which does borrow a lot of its aspects from many other games. It certainly owes more than a nod and a wink to Assassin's Creed, with its stealth-like ability to run around, its traversal system, with its fast and fluid aerial combat, even having its own leap of faith. And it definitely owes a nod, a wink and a wave to Batman. The control system in the game and the combat system in the game is basically that game evolved onto another level, but it wears its heart on its sleeve, this game, and that is covered in blood, guts and entrails. This is a violent combat system, but it works really well. You have the same process you have in Batman, where multiple enemies can surround you, and there is points in this game where there is many enemies on screen at once. You can then use the attack button and the defend button. You can't just spam it. The problem with spamming it is you earn up strike points. If you then just spam the Y button to defend yourself, you'll waste what you've built up and lose that chance. So it does force you into more tactical play. Also, you can use critical hits, it's one of the abilities to bump yourself up later in the game, and these then are more timed attacks. You hit them once as you strike. If you get it right, your attack is far more efficient. You get twice the amount of hit strikes, therefore it takes half the amount of time to earn one of the most rewarding sides of the game, and that is the cool executions. The game is full of them, and very much like Rise, it uses that smooth, zoomed in, doff cinematic effect as you take down these orcs in stylish, super slow-mo, John Woo style fashion. The way you can gut, garrote, behead, dismember, it is absolutely superb. It adds such a visceral weight to the game that makes it so rewarding and fun when you fight 35, 40 guys at once and you don't get touched. You take everyone down. Yes, it's unbelievable. Yes, it's extreme, but that's the point of the game. You feel like an absolute total rock hard piece of shit badass that wants to take everyone down and is really all out, taking no prisoners and no shit. And that is what makes this game fun. The problem with it is pretty much all there is to the game. There is some diversity in the styles of game, with obviously the stealth aspect, sneaking around collecting flowers, or sneaking into an encampment to poison all the ale bowls, and if you get spotted or the alarm gets raised and the mission ends and you have to restart it. Or even some of the fun ones, go in this room, piss everyone off and kill 35 orcs. And it does break that up quite well within the game, and the story does flow reasonably well. There is a few plot hole issues with the game, obviously. The fact that you've had such a traumatic experience at the beginning of the game, you quite quickly forget all about that and just continue on this mission without any questioning why, how and how's going on, or even where your family is at this point. There's also the issue with how widespread the maps are and how diverse the mission structure is. Because you can move in and out of the actual storyline missions and the side quest missions, you can actually end up losing track of whereabouts you are in the story. Overall, if you love this aspect of the world and you love Lord of the Rings, then you are going to absolutely adore this game. It is full of nods and references to the lore of this epic universe. It has a detailed appendices within the game that you can look at all the information and the areas that are within the world, like Mount Doom, and obviously Gondor's referenced in there, even though it's not in this game. And then you've got the information on all the characters from the game. So the Hammer of Sauron, the Tower of Sauron, and obviously the Dark Hand himself, along with every other character in the game. And their voice acting and the art style is true to the source material, and it's very well put together, with solid production values and a fun, if slightly exaggerated storyline that at least keeps you gripped until the end, with superb characters adding more weight to the stunning world of the Lord of the Rings universe. The AI can be a bit dodgy and the conal view of them can be really poor, so you can end up sneaking around, running around in fact, with the sneak button on, with enemies seeing you, or at least being in the vicinity of easily seeing you, and then reacting really badly. The stealth kills can happen even if you're face onto characters, which does eliminate the stealth element of the game a little because it makes it far too easy and contrived to use. Also, the Nemesis system would have been improved in my opinion if they'd have used that to undermine the captains and the villains in the game across the maps by using your ability to sneak into areas, lay a trail of breadcrumbs and upset the apple cart by making them think that somebody within their camp is working against them and having a treason effect. This could then create internal battles and maybe even wars across areas that you could then capitalise on by moving into their area and taking control of it, or even gaining abilities or resources from their camps. This is something that I feel may seem to other styles of this game when they use the Nemesis system, and even if Monolith make another game within the Lord of the Rings world, hopefully these are the kind of improvements they may add to this game and many other fresh ideas in other games and genres. But all of these are minor niggles and they don't distract from a superbly laid out game and a really satisfying and gratifying combat system. The Nemesis system has a unique way of ranking up your character's abilities using the power struggles and making Talion a bitter badass with even more powers and execution skills, and bumping up Celebrimbor with more of his wraith powers and abilities. The game delivers on all aspects of what it set out to do. The only thing you are possibly going to be disappointed with is the variation of the game style is not massive. It is an action game, and an action game all the way through. There's not huge tactical aspects to how this game plays out, and you have to bear that in mind. That said, I absolutely loved it, and I really can recommend this thoroughly to anyone into action games. Whether you're into Lord of the Rings or not, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Now, onto the actual technical side of the game. This game is a visual treat to look at. A lot of people have not given this game enough credit, and it certainly is delivering an open world with superb character design and detail. The vivid world they've created, with stunning lighting evident throughout the entire world, from dusk till dawn. The lighting system, the weather system, the detail on the physically based rendering again. The character models and design are absolutely a work of art. When you get up close with these characters and the actual detail and the textures and the lighting and the specular reflection against their faces is something to behold, and it really does look like some kind of CG movie in action. When you're overwhelmed with 30-40 orcs all attacking you at once, the frame rate stays solid and smooth, and the amount of lighting effects, animation, the keyframe animation from the battle system and the animation from the orcs as they attack you and get destroyed and mutilated by you is absolutely stupendous. I cannot stress enough the amount of detail they've gone into the skeletal system of the animation. You've got physics based in there as the bodies fall and collapse and bang against areas. Objects can be destroyed. You've got the swords as they bounce around when they're taken down. Your cloak bellowing in the wind. and this runs across all three systems very closely indeed. Now, one of the things that's a little bit of a disappointment, and I'm going to come straight out and say it, is when I played this last week at EGX, either I played a PC version hidden behind a door, which from the dips I saw I seriously doubt, or they've locked this frame rate down to 30 on the PS4, because this is not a 60 frames per second game. This is a 30 frames per second game on the PS4, just like it is on the Xbox One. Now, I understand why they've done it after going through the technical details, but it's a bit of a shame that they showed something at a show that's now already changed a week later. So whether or not that's something that they did at the time and they'd already decided to bring it to the show on that level that they had, a lot of the games at shows are obviously beta development kits that get shown. It's very rare you'll get a full final image running unless there's a demo version available that's gone out to retail or to review areas. But it is a shame. It's 30 frames. Does it make a huge difference? No, not really. But it's a shame that, again, another situation where they aimed at 60, but in the end they've locked it down to 30. Now, that's obviously the best and safest option, I would imagine, for the developer side of it. But again, I personally think it would have been a much better option for them to leave it unlocked and then add an option in to lock it down to 30. Let the end user choose that, just like they did on Second Son, just like they did on Killzone. Even The Last of Us had that option added in, and that game didn't need it at all. But yeah, outside of that, let's move on to the technical side of it. How close are these in all three versions? Well, let's take a look at that in detail. The first thing you can notice straight away when we run the comparison between the PS4 and the PC version is the consoles run the textures on high. Look at the detail of the character here up close on high and medium, which I run on my PC just because of the texture RAM. There's a huge difference on the arms and the skin. Outside of that, you can see the difference in motion blur. Here the PS4 version has motion blur evident. Consoles versions both have, with the PC version only working if you set it to camera or object, not both. Now, comparing the PS4, the PC and Xbox One version here, you are struggling to see a difference, specifically in the Wraith mode because of the screen texture. But here, between all three, they pretty much look identical aside the texture drop off on the PC version I'm running. I'll go into more detail on that in the video. Now, the PC version here on Ultra Textures compared to the PS4 version, there is hardly any difference, and that's simply because the PC version on Ultra Textures, it doesn't cover every texture. You basically get a couple of places like the walls and the floor and the barrel where you can see this difference, which I'll show you now. Now, the texture quality is not huge between high and ultra, as you can see here, and it only affects some textures and you have to look out for them. Character models and general scenery are not really affected, you have to stare, and even on Xbox One there's nothing really wrong with the detail on this shot. It's not the huge contrast you get from medium to high textures, which affect pretty much everything including character models. Ultra to high is not a massive difference, and you need a 4 gig card or greater to run them, and you really need a 3 gig card to run them on high. Outside of this, ultra textures in the weather and everywhere else in the game, you don't notice the difference between that and the PS4 or the Xbox One. They all look pretty much identical, and it's hard to spot any difference at all when you're playing.
Dear Heil, remember your training!
The lighting engine in the game and the specular reflection, specifically when it's wet on the walls, floor and everything else, is identical across all three versions. The way it occludes with objects that the camera pans around and shadows cast over it, there is no difference whatsoever, all three versions running the high setting, so long as you've got an adequate system on PC. And this is vitally important because lighting plays a massive part in this game. With the day and night cycle during the day and the way the physically based rendering works, certainly when you're fighting around campfires in the night in the rain, and the way the shadows cast across not only the objects and the scenery and the characters in real time, but also cascade along the grass and hair realistically. This is improved even further by having the characters being able to be kicked or run through the fire and catch on fire as they react, and also when you're fighting in the moonlight or daylight near a campfire, you get double shadows from both sides of the source light, which is highly impressive. With some scenes you've got 20-30 characters on screen yourself, all casting multiple shadows in different directions. A highly impressive lighting system indeed. And this highlights another difference between the versions on console and PC. Here you can see a motion blur and doff effect as you pull off an execution. Again, the same on the Xbox One. But on PC this is completely absent. You get no effect at all, and this is not only in these cutscenes, you also get them when you're playing the game. The Xbox One and the PS4 version both have a motion blur process in place when you play the game, when the camera spins and per object, and this is an annoying bug on the PC version, having to set them to one or other in the menu. It's a reasonably heavy computational process, especially a well implemented version of motion blur and per object in this game. You don't need it on PC if you can get to that 60 frames or thereabouts, but I love it because it looks more CG like. It's also a great example of how effective motion blur is in smoothing out a 30 FPS presentation. A lot of PC gamers turn it off, and this then makes the 30 FPS seem far more juddery and less smooth than it does on consoles, and this is a great example firsthand. If you have it on PC, flick it on, as there will be many PCs that won't get up to a locked 60 frames per second, and 30 frames will be an option. Without this motion blur, that 30 feels a lot less smooth. The other differences you can see is the anisotropic filtering on the textures. Here on the PC version you can see it's running on high, which is 8 times AF. If we move to the PS4, it's pretty much identical. There is a slight blur in the background, but that's more to do with the fact that this console version and the Xbox One runs FXAA, and the PC version runs absolutely nothing at all, which ends up making the objects and edges seem more jagged, which again you can see here on the sword and the edge of Talion's coat. This obviously stands out a lot more with the Xbox One version running 900, therefore it's more jagged, but it still runs the same FXAA solution. You can also see the difference here from the shadows, with the Xbox One running medium shadows and the PS4 running high. You can also see the comparison between the 8 times anisotropic filtering on both consoles, which is high on PC, and Ultra on PC, which is 16 times. Also of note is tessellation runs across the consoles. You see here on Talion's coat and his sleeve, with the PC version with tessellation turned off, whereas on Xbox One and PS4 it's fully tessellated and gives you that detail and depth that you don't see when it's turned off. And this carries over into the world with the rocks and scenery using displacement mapping to increase the detail as you move towards them. You can see this here as I zoom in on the left hand side of the PS4 version, and the ground builds a tessellation as you move towards it, and this just adds more depth and weight to the area and the ground around and the objects in the game. Now I haven't seen much tessellation on character models other than the Talion example, but you can see the difference here on PC where I turn it on and where I turn it off, and it just adds more depth and believability to the world, and it's good to see tessellation fully running on consoles now. Finally, you can see the difference between the ambient occlusion in the game, which also affects the specular. Ultra running on the PC here is higher than it is on the PS4, because the PS4 is comparable to high, as is the Xbox One, both of them running ambient occlusion on the high setting from the PC. And outside of that, all you're left with then is the actual PC issues of running this game if you've got 2 gig or less in your card. You can run this game and it does run reasonably well. The settings that I run it now on is borderless, as you see on screen. I run it at 1080, I run medium textures, and I get around 45-ish average frame rate, maybe a little bit more in certain areas. It does peak, it does trough, and that's the best method to play this game, and it's smooth enough on medium textures and you don't get any jittering at all. If you put it on high, on borderless, you do get the free buffer on the actual RAM, which helps a lot, but it does make the game judder occasionally, and it can be a bit sporadic when you're playing. It's worse when you're spinning and jumping up and climbing areas, but there's no real hard rule to say when it starts loading. You can see here on the system when you're running it, I've got a 2 gig card at the top end. You can see where I'm using my full 2 gig, and then my system RAM is bumping up as it feeds that into the VRAM and out, and those are your stutters basically. The consoles don't need to worry about that because they've got unified RAM, therefore it's just all dumped in one place. Again, these are the kind of changes you get with PC games. Because consoles are the main development function, they will always make games that are centered around that. Monolith has done a great job on the options and it runs supremely well. There is no real issues with this game outside of what they already told us. The 6 gig is obviously a safe bet. If you've got that kind of card, it will use up to it, basically whatever you've got, it will chuck data in there. You don't need a 6 gig card to run this game. Ultra textures look okay, but they're not a huge difference. If you've got one, great, stick it in. My advice, if you are looking at buying a PC or upgrading your PC, do not buy a card at this point, even if the 970 is an amazing card. There's lots more things coming out on the market, but if you are going to buy one, if you absolutely have to buy something, and the Nvidia 970 is the best buy you can get at the moment with 4 gig, because that is the bare minimum you're going to need this generation. Games are going to start using more RAM, and that's only going to get larger if they allocate, and they will allocate some more of that space back to the consoles into games when the operating systems get chopped down. Final verdict is that these are very close versions indeed from Xbox One to PS4. You have a native 1080 on PC and PS4, or you could go higher depending on your spec. and your Xbox One you're running 1600 by 900 resolution. They are very close. The console seems to struggle again because this is quite a heavy CPU process with loads of draw calls on the tessellation and the LOD, which is why the LOD cutback on it seems to be pretty heavy compared to the high-end PC version, which looks to be around medium setting, which is not a huge deal, but it does make a difference, and this is the reason why I think it's been chopped back at the last minute. Those slow 1.6 GHz CPUs are going to cause issues when you're running your whole pipeline through them, forcing you CPU bound. And these are some of the changes that I think we'll see throughout this generation, with some GPU driven pipelines very soon in the process. That aside, I hope you enjoyed this detailed review and head-to-head. All the information you need is here. If you have any questions or if you have any feedback on this game, have you played it, are you enjoying it, any other feedback, please click the link below. As always, if you like this or any of my other content, then please hit that sub button, it really helps me a lot. Hit the like if you did, and comment below. And with that, like Talion, I disappear into the sunsets, and I bid you guys and girls farewell, and I'll see you on the next one.